Hello, I am R.E. Burden. Welcome to my show, R.E. Burden Presents Deep Dives into the Divine Design. Today's topic, Rediscovering Time. The Messiah-Centered Calendar.
Okay, so we're back for another deep dive, and today we're going to be looking at, well, time itself, actually, from the perspective of your shaped sources, that is.
Right.
This is a collection of excerpts. We're calling it pasted text. And the core idea here revolves around this really interesting concept of a Messiah-centered calendar. Have you had a chance to look this over? What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty significant shift in perspective, really. You've presented material that suggests we reevaluate our whole understanding of time,
Yeah.
seeing the Messiah's birth not just as an event in history, but like as the pivotal point, the true anniversary of Creation Day.
Mm.
And what I find really eye-opening is how this calendar reframes our entire historical narrative. I mean, it suggests that all of history, finds its focal point, not just in an event within time, but as a direct outflow of that initial creative act. Understood through the lens of the Messiah, of course.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. And for you, our listener, who's always, eager to connect the dots to gain a deeper understanding, this deep dive, I think, offers like a unique shortcut into some pretty profound ideas about time and its meaning.
Absolutely.
So our mission today, I guess you could say, is to really extract the core insights from these texts about the nature of time, the act of creation, and their interconnectedness with the Messiah as presented in these sources.
Yeah. Sounds good. And I think we're starting with a couple of really compelling elements.
Okay.
The first is this notion of a creation day that seems to precede the numbered days of the creation week, right? It's almost described as a calends, that's C-A-L-E-N-D-S, pronounced like calendar without the R and with the Z sound at the end, sort of like a foundational day before the first Sunday.
Okay, so let's unpack this Kalen's idea a bit. I mean, it sounds like we're setting the stage before the main performance begins.
Right, exactly.
And the source material, it hints at a Hebrew cyclical way of understanding things, suggesting that to really grasp this pre-week creation day, we need to sort of move beyond a strictly linear timeline. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's precisely it. And the second key area we'll be diving into is the link being drawn in these texts between this initial calends, this creation day, and the Sabbath day. The material suggests a relationship between the Roman calends and the first new moon, and how this connection might illuminate the significance of that sacred seventh day of the week.
So it's like we're uncovering like layers of meaning embedded in the very structure of time.
Yeah, I think so.
Let's start with this really fundamental idea of the intentionality behind time. The sources, they strongly imply that time wasn't just like a random occurrence, but it's a deliberate creation by the Almighty, infused with a sacred purpose.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating here is the idea that by aligning ourselves with this original, divine intent, we might discover a deeper sense of meaning and connection in our own lives. It brings us back to that core question. How is time woven into the very fabric of creation?
Right, right. And the pasted text, it even references Genesis 1.12 through the lens of the Scriptures version, the DDSV. And this translation emphasizes arrangement, adornment, and revelation as a pattern right from the outset. That certainly prompts a different way of considering our own endeavors, doesn't it? How might this pattern of preparation and unveiling apply to, the projects or goals that you're currently focused on?
That's a crucial point. And this idea of an unenumerated creation day before the numbered days that emerges when we look closely at the Hebrew cyclical narrative that's hinted at in Genesis 2.46. The source material indicates that Genesis 1.1-2, it omits certain details that are later filled in, suggesting this initial day singular of creating the skies and the earth was a distinct, foundational phase.
It's almost like laying the groundwork before constructing the building itself.
Yeah, exactly, like a blueprint.
And this unenumerated creation day is proposed as a potential, get this, a prototype, first new moon day, which is a rather mind-bending concept, I have to say, when you consider it occurring even before the moon itself was created.
Right.
What does the pasted text suggest about the nature of that initial day if it predates such a key celestial marker of time?
Exactly. And this is where the connection to the Roman kalends comes in. The text mentions Gesenius, a renowned Hebrew scholar who links kalends to the first new moon day. He references Exodus 19.1, which speaks of the first new moon day of the third month, and Exodus 12.1 to 2, which establishes the first new moon day as the day for counting the months of the year. So you can see this thread emerging, connecting these different cultural and historical understandings of time's beginnings.
And it gets even more specific with the mention of an ancient rabbi, Yashua, that's Y-A-S-H-U-A, pronounced like Joshua, only with a Y sound at the start cited in the Gemara. This Rabbi Yashua believed that Nisan 1 was the only New Year's Day truly supported by Scripture.
Interesting. What's truly fascinating here is the potential connection being drawn, you see, that this initial creation day could have aligned with Nisan 1 and therefore with the Roman calends. So the proposed link here is that if this creation day aligns with Nisan 1, which ancient Jewish tradition saw as the true New Year, and if Nisan 1 has a potential parallel to the Roman calends, then this calendar is anchoring its very beginning to a date considered significant in both Hebraic and later Roman contexts, albeit through a Messiah-centered interpretation.
Okay, so we have this calends as a potential starting point, possibly linked to Nisan 1. Now let's explore how the source material connects this foundational marker to the weekly cycle. It makes an interesting assertion about the Roman Republic calendar.
Yeah, it states that in the Roman Republic calendar, the calends, which is always the first day of the month, never actually aligns with Sunday. This is a specific detail that sets the stage for the Messiah-centered calendar's unique proposition, regarding the relationship between beginnings and the weekly cycle.
Which is?
Well, that this Messiah-centered calendar posits the old creation day that Genesis 1.1 to 2 period revisited in 2.43 as the very first calends of the year, specifically marking it as March 1st, 3999 BC.
Wow.
And following directly from that, the first day of the week, Sunday, then falls on March 2nd, 3999 BC, according to this calendar. So you see this clear distinction being made between the initial creation day as the calends and the subsequent numbered days of creation week starting with Sunday. Building on this idea of the calends as a foundational marker, the pasted text then explores how this initial point relates to the regular rhythm of our week, specifically the connection to the Sabbath.
That makes sense. And the text also highlights the role of the consecutive wa. That's a seemingly small grammatical detail in Hebrew that actually carries significant weight, indicating a sequence of events. It points out that Genesis 1.1 to 2 lacks this consecutive wa, emphasizing its introductory nature, standing apart from the sequential acts that follow. So you're suggesting that the absence of then signifies a foundational principle rather than a sequential event.
Precisely. The first appearance of this then is in Genesis 1.3, Then the Almighty Creator said, This really underscores that Genesis 1.1 to 2 provides the foundational framework before the step-by-step unfolding of creation.
I see. And then there's the interesting point about the sequential markers of evening and morning. The text clarifies that these signify the end of the day and the end of the night, not necessarily the start and end of a 24-hour period in the way we might typically think.
Right, exactly. The source uses the example of Passover timing in Exodus to illustrate this. Understanding evening and morning as sequential markers, helps clarify when certain events were to take place according to Scripture.
Okay, so we've explored this idea of a foundational calends before the first Sunday of Creation Week and its potential link to Nisan 1. Now let's turn our attention to how this initial creation day connects with the Sabbath, that crucial seventh day.
Okay, sure. So the source material presents Shabbath, the seventh day, as the culmination of creation, a day set apart for rest and divine purpose. It's not just about ceasing work, It's about entering into a state of completion and connection.
Right. And this is where that tongue, day 7, and skin, creation, day before creation week analogy from the making sense of the cosmic dot to dot section comes in. It's a really evocative image, I think.
It is. The analogy suggests that Shabbath, linked to the sensory experience of taste, represents spiritual nourishment, a deeper engagement with the divine. And this creation day before creation week, associated with the skin and the sense of touch, symbolizes the completeness of that initial divine connection, the foundation upon which everything else is built.
So while day 7 might initially seem disconnected from this creation day that came before the numbered week, the text argues that the Hebrew cyclical narrative helps us see the underlying link. It's like the narrative circles back to illuminate the significance of this initial creation day, right?
Precisely. And this creation day before creation week is then connected back to the Roman calends, the start of a new monthly cycle. The source material draws a parallel here, suggesting that just as the calends marks a new beginning for the month, the Sabbath marks the culmination of the week. There's this implied calends before the first Sunday that sets the stage for the entire weekly rhythm.
That's really interesting.
What's fascinating here is how the very first kalends, in this Messiah-centered understanding, could be seen as a precursor and counterpart to the sacred rhythm culminating in the Sabbath. It's like the foundational act of creation, the initial kalends, provides the basis for the weekly cycle that finds its purpose and rest in the Sabbath.
Yeah. And the text makes a really interesting point that this first new moon day, potentially this initial creation day or kalends, began before the moon was even created.
Mm.
It's a bit like the spiritual significance of the Sabbath transcending the physical act of creating the week.
Yeah.
The importance, the purpose is there from the outset.
Exactly. It highlights that the divine order and the establishment of sacred time are not solely dependent on the physical creation as we understand it. There's a deeper intentionality at play where foundational principles exist even before their physical manifestations.
So to bring it all together for you, our listener, we've journeyed through this idea of a foundational creation day, or kalends, that predates the first numbered day of creation. We've explored its potential connection to the first new moon, its possible alignment with Nisan 1, and how the Hebrew cyclical narrative helps us understand its significance as a distinct and foundational act.
And we've seen how this initial kalends, in the understanding presented by the Messiah-centered calendar, can be viewed as a precursor and a counterpart to the sacred rhythm that culminates in the Sabbath. It's like the opening note in a symphony that resonates throughout the entire piece, with the Sabbath being the harmonious resolution of the week that began with that foundational kalends.
It really makes you think about the interconnectedness of beginnings and endings, doesn't it? So for you, our listener, consider this final thought. How might understanding time through this Messiah-centered lens, with its initial kalends and the weekly Sabbath, reshape your understanding of beginnings, endings, and that overarching divine design in your own life? Perhaps reflecting on the significance of both fresh starts and those dedicated times of rest and reflection can offer a new perspective on the very fabric of your time. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Yeah, thank you for listening.